Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are joining us from today. I'm delighted to welcome us all to this international colloquium on the logics of artificial intelligence in celebration of UNESCO's World Logic Day. So once again, you all are welcome. The essence of this colloquium today is to bring different logical traditions together to see what they could contribute to the design and development of AI systems. So today we have speakers from different logical traditions, for example, from Western logical tradition, from Indian logical tradition, Chinese and even African logical traditions, who are experts in the field of logic, and they will be speaking to us today. So this is how our colloquium will run for today. I will call each speaker. Each speaker has 30 minutes for his or her lecture and 10 minutes for Q&A. So please, as you join this colloquium, try as much as possible to mute yourself. And during the Q&A, please keep your questions brief. And please, to the speakers, also keep your responses brief. So I will start by one more thing to note, please. This colloquium will be recorded for educational purposes, which will be uploaded to the Conversational School of Philosophy YouTube website. So by joining this colloquium, you agree that the recording of this video should be uploaded for educational purposes. Now, once again, welcome you all to this colloquium. So at this point, I will start by calling the Conversational School of Philosophy to give us a 5 minutes welcome speech. Thank you. Dr. Arabia, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Amara, and congratulations for hosting and organizing this very wonderful workshop. All right, so the Conversational School of Philosophy, which is obviously an offshoot of the Calabar School of Philosophy, is a philosophical society that has, for the past 2 decades, tried to provide a forum, create a platform where African philosophers can begin to theorize and produce new and novel insights into various aspects of various problems in African philosophy. Not just bringing together African philosophers to do this job, we've over time created platforms that brings together African philosophers and philosophers from elsewhere to discuss certain pertinent topics. So we've organized various workshops, various conferences, and various colloquiums for this purpose. And this colloquium, I believe, is one of such initiatives from the Conversational School, and with Amara as the anchor for this particular program. Now, the issue of AI, as we all know, has been a very ubiquitous issue in philosophy, generally speaking. And African philosophers have also contributed to the debate on AI ethics and just the general discussion on AI. But rarely have African philosophers discussed issues on what logics are appropriate or what logic should be used when certain AI neural networks are being created. And so this colloquium is going to be a very important colloquium in bridging that intellectual gap. And so on that note, I would like to, on behalf of the Conversational School, welcome all of us to this novel, groundbreaking colloquium. And I look forward to hearing some of the contributions from African philosophy, from philosophy in other philosophical traditions, on this very pertinent issue that this colloquium intends to look at. So on behalf of the Conversational School, I welcome everyone to this colloquium and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riviere. Thank you. My name is Amara Esther Chimakonam. I am the organizer and I'll be your host for today. I'm a postdoc at the Center for African Phenomenology, University of Fort Hare, South Africa. So without taking much of our time, we'll call the first speaker for today. Kindly note that I won't be reading the full profile of all the speakers. What I will do is to briefly introduce the speaker, then the speaker's abstract and short bio will be posted on the chat box. Thank you. So our first speaker today is Dr. Jacopo. He's from the University of Modena, Reggio Emilia, Italy. He'll be speaking to us today on opacity, accountability, and normativity toward a right to explanation or justification. Remember that his abstract and his short bio is posted right here on the chat box. Mr. Chakopu, please speak to us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks you. Thanks to you, to the organizer, for organizing this colloquium and for having him here. I will try to share the PowerPoint with you. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. I will just start it in the presentation mode. Okay, so you can still see it if I move it, and you can still see my face, right? So we have both, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So what I want to do, so the aim of the paper I wrote and the presentation for today is to tackle the problem of opacity, which I'm sure you are aware of in artificial intelligence, but tackling from a different perspective. So the idea is to establish a robust framework for accountability in this digital era we are approaching. And in order to do so, I think it's imperative to ensure that AI systems operate not only transparently, but also justifiably. So aligning their decision with broader moral, political, but also legal norms. I have divided the presentation into three parts. In the first part, I will briefly summarize the debate around opacity and the rise of XI movement, which was a response to this problem, while also providing some clarification from the philosophy of action, which I'm doing my PhD project on in Modena. And I will try to clarify some of the concept of motivation, explanation, and justification. In the second part, I will analyze one of the most notable paper on the topic of the right to explanation, which is Kate Bradenburg's paper called precisely the right to explanation. And I will argue that unlike narrower definition that focus only on technical transparency, a framework incorporates a crucial normative dimension that is important to underline. And finally, in the third part, I will compare Bradenburg's right to explanation with Rainer Fort's right to justification, arguing that the two approaches are not mutually exclusive, as some scholars might argue. And I believe, contrary, that together they provide a comprehensive normative framework for accountability that can be useful to tackle the problem of opacity and other broader worries connected to artificial intelligence in general. Okay, so starting with the first part of the presentation, namely the overview of the opacity debate. I'm sure most of you know what the problem of opacity in AI refers to. So it's the challenge of understanding how and why AI systems make decision. So the issue here is particularly pressing for complex models like deep learning algorithms, which often function as black box, no? so that even the developers may struggle to interpret the internal reasoning behind their outputs. So regarding this point, it's important to stress that while I truly believe that technical transparency is important, I still argue that the black box problem alone does not fully capture the broader issue of opacity, which is a bigger and more important problem. So what I argue is that the challenge extends beyond mere technical inaccessibility, since it also involves question about interpretability, accountability, and justification, as we will see. So in general, we can say that a system may be technically trustable, yet still fail to provide a meaningful explanation or justification to different stakeholder, policymaker, individuals, or oversight body. So to address this complexity, I propose to distinguish between three different types of opacity, or we can say three different level of opacity, each reflecting a different dimension of this problem. So this approach, I think, allows for a more nuanced understanding of AI's opacity and helps identify strategies to improve not only transparency, but also the justification of AI-driven decision in a way that aligns with broader moral and political norms. So at the first level, we have technical opacity, which we were talking about, which arises from the inherent complexity of machine learning models, particularly those employing advanced architectures such as deep neural network. And of course, we can say that this type of system operate, as we said, as black box. So their internal processes are not easily interpretable, even to the expert who design and train them. So the challenge here lies in the way this model function, basically. So they identify patterns in data and make prediction based on high complex multi-layered computation. So while the algorithm themselves can be understood at a mathematical level, the sheer number of parameters and the interaction make it very difficult to pinpoint how specific decisions are made. And this opacity, of course, poses a significant risk, especially in high-stakes application. We can think about healthcare, criminal justice, or even autonomous vehicle, which are starting to get more and more common. And of course, this is a very important problem. But there are also other problems connected to opacity. At the second level, for example, we have commercial opacity, as Lou call it, which compounds the issue here because the main problem stems more from the proprietary nature of many AI systems. So there are some companies and organizations that often guard their algorithms and data as trade secrets, citing competitive advantage and intellectual property concern as a reason for doing it. So this practice, however, creates a barrier to external scrutiny and independent validation. So it leaves regulatory bodies, researchers, and also actual individual citizens unable to fully assess how decisions are made, which may create some problem, of course, because this lack of transparency undermines public trust and fuels concern about misuse or abuse of AI technology. And this is also connected to a more even deeper level, which is that of societal opacity, which mirror the disparity between those who design and deploy AI system and those who are subject to their outputs. The developers typically operate with high technical and specialized domain, but also when they do so, most of the time they lack awareness of the social, cultural, and ethical implication of their work. Conversely, users and stakeholders affected by this system often lack the technical literacy to critically engage with or challenge the technology they use or undergo. This gap exacerbate power imbalance, leaving individuals and community vulnerable to decision. So decision they cannot fully understand or how they influence themselves. And for example, the classical example here is that a marginalized group are disproportionately impacted by biased AI system, which may struggle to advocate for change on this topic. So this form of opacity not only obscure the inner working of AI system, but also undermine our trust in them. They create an environment where decisions made by AI can appear arbitrary or unscrutable, fostering frustration, skepticism, and in some cases also tangible harms, I would say. To address this challenge, one of the first widely recognized framework to emerge was the movement of the so-called explainable AI, which is short always written as XAI. Um, what was this movement about? So Van Lee was maybe the most famous author, and it was the one that introduced the concept. He introduced this concept to describe the system ability to clarify the action of AI-controlled units in specifically simulation gaming. So in this early development, however, the explainability the movement was referring to, this type of explainability was mostly directed at the first type of opacity we distinguish, so the functional understanding of a model. So in this sense, we can say that the term explainability was used interchangeably with interpretability and specifically refers to providing human readable insight into a model decision in order to describe its otherwise opaque, precisely, the black box behavior that we wanted to avoid. Also, there are also recent literature on inside this movement that try to specify the concept of explainability also in other way, like with the satisfaction stability. This is important to note. But the point is that even if we achieve explainability in the sense of interpretability and transparency, I believe this appear insufficient to tackle the problem of opacity in all its three levels we have distinguished. So, if we take, for example, generative language like ChatGPT, which do not perform formal reasoning or logical syllogism, but simply simulate reasoning based on statistical patterns and probability from a lot of data. Like basically, they just try to guess what's the next word or even what's the next letter in some case. So, of course, you can ask ChatGPT how it gave us an answer to a specific problem, and she will try to explain, she will try to outline how the algorithm works. It cannot, so in this sense, it will be transparent to us, to the user. So, but this explanation, if you want to use the word that it can give us, it cannot fully explain the intricate moment-to-moment choice it makes in generating specific response, such how it prioritizes words or emphasizes certain details in giving this answer. This is the reason why I believe that while AI explanation provides some transparency, they fail to address deeper moral and political concern. Agents expect AI not only to be transparent, but also accountable, an expectation that inherently involves some type of normativity. So accountability requires going beyond technical the descriptions of how decision was made to engage meaningfully with the normative dimension of AI system. And I believe that this involves articulating reason that address the moral and political implication of their action. So to understand better how I believe normativity is connected to explainability, it is useful to analyze the different type of reason an agent can give to explain something to one another, because giving reason is precisely giving an explanation to immense answer. So in the philosophy of action, however, there are a distinction with two primary meaning of reason that address at least two distinct questions. So one question is about how one ought to act, and this is a justificatory reason, something that applies to everyone, supposedly. And another is about what actually motivates someone to act, and this is a motivating reason. For instance, we can ask whether there is a reason for the government of a country to tax sugary drinks, and we would want a justificatory reason for that, but also ask for the government reason for actually taxing the drinks. So, in this example, the same reason may be overlapping, may be the same, no? So maybe the reason to support taxing sugary drinks could be that the tax will help reduce child obesity. And in such a case, the government is motivated by the reason that is not only justifiable, so it does not only motivate the president, the mayor, but it also justify his action. However, this example also show that they do not always concede, do not always overlap, because the government might tax sugary drinks because some of its members own shares in companies that sell low salary alternative. And in this scenario, so we see that the motivating reason behind the government's decision is not a reason that justifies action. No? So the distinction between justificatory and motivating reason allow us to differentiate between the psychological question of what motivates agent to act and the normative question of whether those reasons are actually justifiable. So the central question we should ask ourselves regarding our topic on artificial intelligence is, when we discuss the right to explanation in the context of AI, what exactly are we referring to? Are we merely seeking a descriptive account of what was done and why, or are we also delving into whether what was done aligns with normative principle that justify the action? So to engage meaningfully with the discussion surrounding the right to explanation in the AI field, I think it is essential to address this ambiguity. And I believe that explanation cannot be limited to recounting causal or motivational factor. It must also include the normative reason that justify action in a way that withstand critical scrutiny. This broader conception of explanation is vital, I believe, to tackling the problem of opacity in all the three dimensions we distinguish, from technical transparency to social accountability. So only by adopting this normative perspective can we fully address the challenge posed by opacity and ensure robust mechanism of accountability. So let's now try to move over the specific paper that tackled this debate, which is that of Brandenburg's right to explanation. This paper offers an interesting exploration of the question we have discussed so far, I believe. It starts by arguing that individuals possess a fundamental moral interest in informed self-advocacy, which require precisely a right to explanation, according to her. Because this right enables people to understand and challenge decisions that impact them, particularly within hierarchical and non-voluntary institutions. So Brandenburg identified three different types of explanation that the individual might have a right to. So she distinguished between intentional explanation, which explain action based on an agent's motivating reason, so the reason the agent consider as motivating their action. Causal explanation, which explain action based on causes, which might include motivating reason, but also involve non-reason-based factors such as physical cause or imposition by someone else, another agent maybe. And then normative explanation, which explain action in terms of normative reason. So reason that objectively count in favor of an action, irrespective of whether the agent acted on them or not. So here, Brandenburg, we can see is using explanation as a broad general term that precedes that of reason, and that encompass the distinction we previously introduced, such as motivating and justificatory reason. So in this broader sense, explanation are processes that provide information or reason, we can say, about why a decision or action was undertaken. It is crucial, however, to avoid misinterpreting Brandenburg's focus on explanation as being limited solely on the intentional and motivational aspect of the how of decision making, as this is the problem, I believe, with some of the authors of the XI movement seems to do, like Retzlaff, for example. So Brandenburg explicitly underlined in the paper that normative reason are central to her conception of explanation and self-advocacy, of course. Brandenburg conception informed self-advocacy is especially important within hierarchical and non-voluntary institutions, namely those from which individuals cannot opt out and which have a significant impact on their lives. And she argued that for the legitimacy and fairness of such institution, it is essential for individuals to have the ability to understand the rules, comply with them, and correct potential errors. When institutions make decisions that significantly affect people's life, it is crucial that individuals are not left in the dark about why certain decisions are made or subjected to procedure they cannot comprehend. This is why explanations are necessary for individuals to be in a good, let's say, epistemic position to engage in informed self-advocacy. Without them, people are not equipped to understand the rules, represent their interests, demand accountability, or, in short, exercise full agency. Therefore, a right to explanation for a variable is crucial for protecting individuals against the potential for societal arbitrary and unfair treatment, similarly to Joseph K. in Kafka's novel The Trial, which is an example that Kate Redwood makes in the paper. In the end of the paper, she also outlined a dilemma regarding a potential conflict between the effectiveness and feasibility of the right to explanation, addressing its justificatory burden for both the right holders and the duty bearers. So, according to the first arm of the dilemma, more complex and accurate explanations are too costly for right holder to use, but simple, more intelligible explanations are also ineffective if they are superficial and do not provide adequate clarity. So they fail to capture all relevant factors. The second order of the dilemma focuses on the cost for the duty bearers. So if explanations were provided in a, let's say, personalized manner specific for each individual, the cost for decision maker will be intolerable. Conversely, if explanation were too abstract, the right to explanation would become ineffective for right holder. So what happened here is that the usual proposed solution to the first order of the dilemma, having personalized explanation, seems to create problem for the second order of the dilemma regarding the duty holder. We arrive so to a sort of impasse. Either the explanation are abstract enough to be tolerably costly to the decision maker, or to be effective, explanation ought to be personalized to the right bearer. But the right is undermined because such personalization is intolerably costly for decision maker. So, what's Kate Bradmore's solution to this dilemma? He proposed that explanation should consist of high-level description of the relevant rules provided by decision maker or free experts, she say. And the fact that she gives some example that some legal system already incorporate them, and this, according to her, demonstrate that the implementation is reasonably cost effective. This description aims for functional transparency, understanding how inputs connect to outputs, without requiring detailed knowledge of the code or the process that generates the output. And this solution for Kate Rademore seeks to balance the effectiveness of the right to explanation with the feasibility for duty bearers, making it tolerably costly for both parties. Okay, so to recap very quickly what we have just said before moving to the final section, Brandwood's argument can be summarized as follows, with three main premises that lead to her main conclusion. So, premise one is that individuals have a fundamental interest in informed self-advocacy, which include understanding and navigating decision-making processes that affect their lives. Premise two is that this interest implies explanation that allows individuals to fully exercise self-advocacy. Premise three is this explanation must be intelligible and effective in providing sufficient detail for informed self-advocacy without becoming overly complex or costly to deliver for both citizen and decision maker. This is the so-called churn of the dilemma. And the conclusion that Kate Rademore derived from all this premise is that we should institute the right to explanation as a fundamental and reasonable costly right to avoid undermining self-advocacy. So this argument positions the right to explanation as an essential right that must be implemented with appropriate calibration to uphold democratic values without creating impractical obligation. In doing so, it challenges us to rethink not only how AI-driven decision-making process should be explained in a transparent way, but also how rights in the digital age should be designed to balance fairness, feasibility, and accountability. Okay, so after having summarized the Brandenburg argument, we move to the third and final part, and I thought it would be useful for the other author, Rainer Forst, to do the opposite and start with a summary of his argument and then analyzing more in detail all its premise and conclusions so that you can instantly see from this slide the connection with Brandenburg. So before starting to analyze this, very quickly in introduction, the right to justification is a core concept of Rainer Forst's political and moral philosophy. It was developed from his PhD dissertation in Frankfurt in 1999, and it still remains one of his most key concepts, even in his recent publication, the Nominal Republic, published last year. And it's also the title of maybe its most famous book, which is called precisely The Right to Justification from 2012. And this is the book I focus the most for this presentation. So in this book, he argued it's a book composed of different essays, but every essay is somehow interconnected with this central argument that I will try to propose, that every person possesses a fundamental right to justification, which he defined as a right to ask for and receive adequate reason for action or norms that affect them. What I've done here is precisely to summarize the argument that connect the essay in this book, which are, I believe, the follow. So there are three premises again, which derive a conclusion. Premise one is that human, as autonomous and rational agents, deserve to be treated with dignity, which entail respecting their capacity to reason and question norms. Premise two is that any exercise of power or authority over individual must be justifiable to those affected, adhering to principle of reciprocity and generality. Premise three is that failure to provide such justification constitutes domination, another central concept, undermining their dignity and justice. And the conclusion that Rainer Forst derived from these three premises is that we should see the right to justification as a fundamental moral and political right that underpin the legitimacy of all norms, rule, and decision in a just society. So I'm assuming this will sound very far-fetched if you haven't read the text, the book. So I will try to go a little bit deeper on each of these premises to explain better to you. So the first premise is rooted in Forst's conception of dignity, a relational concept that refers to the status of human being as a rational autonomous agent. Rationality in its broadest sense, as Forst intended, entails the capacity to give and ask for reason. It's just it. Autonomy instead involves acting with intentional awareness of the reason behind one's action, whether they are normative or motivational. But also, being autonomous means being able to provide those reasons when another agent asks us, why did you do that? Why did you do that? So basically, being autonomous means taking responsibility for one's action. The recognition of our rational and autonomous nature for Forst imply the recognition that we are equal to one another as justifying being, or as you also say, equal normative authorities in the community of justification who owe each other good reason for how they treat one another and for the normative order which they are subject to. Premise two, I'm good on time. Yes, I just need 5 minutes if that's okay. So premise two is that dignity is not a metaphysical demanding concept for Forst, but a practical one, deeply intertwined with the moral reality that every person has a right to justification. So the second premise, we can say, clarify the first regarding dignity and explain that the right to justification imply that the reason for which a certain action or norm is imposed must be such that they cannot be reasonably rejected by any of the person concerned with the context of practical justification. So, but here the problem is, what does reasonably rejected mean? No, and what does reasonable justification mean in general for Forst? So first specify the concept of justification through two key criteria, which are reciprocity and generality. The criteria of reciprocity emphasize that in a situation of justification, no one can claim rights or privilege for themselves while denying them to others. Reciprocity requires mutual respect among the people involved, preventing one party from positioning themselves as superior or superior authority or projecting their own interests, value, or needs onto the others. So reciprocity therefore demands that the reason provided to justify a norm or an action must be such that those propositions would be willing to accept them for themselves, overcoming logics of unilateral power or privilege. This ensure, for force, that justification is not based on arbitrary or partial premises. The criterion of generality instead established that the reason supporting a norm or an action must be shareable by all those affected without excluding or marginalizing anyone. So generality demands inclusivity in the justification process, ensuring that the objection and perspectives of every person involved are taken into account. No individual or group can be excluded from the process of justification, and the reason to provide to this type of group of agent must be such that every reasonable person, regardless of their position or particular interest, can be accepted. Generality for force means that reasons for such norm need to be shareable among all persons affected, not just dominant parties. Okay, so in premise 3, lay the final foundation for demonstrating why the right to justification is a crucial moral and political right for force. He contend that this fundamental right extends beyond being a right over to individuals in particular situation, but is instead a universal principle that forms the cornerstone of a just and equitable social order, which ensure that all individuals are treated with respect and accountability within the framework of shared norms and decision. So norms claiming universal validity must be justifiable reciprocally and generally to all affected individuals to avoid the domination and uphold the dignity and justice. If norms lack this justification, they undermine the autonomy and equality of individuals, turning them into subject of unjust authority and victim of domination. First, thus define domination as the imposition of norms or decisions that fail to meet the criteria of reciprocity and generality, rendering them unjustifiable to the individuals they subject. And this is why the right to justification is essential, not only as a recognition of its status as a foundational moral right, but also as the most fundamental political right, safeguarding individuals as autonomous and equal agents. So now, to conclude, I think we are ready to confront Forst's proposal and that of Rothenburg, and despite minor difference in their specific theories concerning the form of rights, because Rothenburg adhere to the so-called interest theory regarding the function of right, while Forst does not, we can say that both theories place at the center of their theory normative or justificatory reason. So if we set aside this debate between interest and will theories of right, which is considered an outdated division of legal theory, according to many scholars like Wenar or Ripstein, we can recognize that both this conception of the claim right to explanation and the claim right to justification of respectively Redenburg's and Forst share a common function, imposing normative duties on different duty holders. So in this sense, the common main function of this right extends beyond legal theory into broader political but also moral consideration, underscoring the role of justification as a fundamental requirement for legitimacy and fairness in both human and algorithmic decision-making process. So regarding specifically our questions regarding the accountability of AI system, both authors can conclude that the right to explanation or justification should not merely be a status right designed to protect individuals from poor decision by safeguarding their self-advocacy or dignity, but it is a demand right. It's a demand right that compels AI developers to create algorithms that can be normatively justifiable and normatively transparent. In order of truly address the problem of opacity in all its three dimensions, it is crucial to empower individuals and community affected by AI-driven decision enabling them to demand not only clarity, but also normative reason that they can comprehend and critical assess. So in this regard, both Redenburg and fourth framework redefine accountability, elevating it from a more technical aspiration to a fundamental moral and democratic imperative. And this is indeed what I've tried to show in this presentation, that to be accountable, an agent needs to provide normative reason, a reason that is appropriate to specific matter of discussion that cannot reasonably be rejected when asked for justification of their action, and this should apply also to artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jokaku, for your thought-provoking lecture. Please, this is time for questions and comments. Please, if you have any, kindly raise your hand up, then I'll call you to make your comment or ask your question. So, Mr. Jakapu, I'm still like trying to wrap my mind around the idea of how explainable or justifiable AI would actually solve this black box problem. I know you hinted on it during your lecture. Please, can you, explain further on this? Thank you.
Sure. So the idea is actually that they should not only explain the black box problem, but also explain also on the other level of the opacity problem. So it's not, I guess, difficult to imagine development of the technical progress where some type of AI could explain their decision making by very in detail how they gave the output to us. But this, I believe, should not be enough. So even if this black box became white box and we can see transparently how they give this output, in some sense, we should also ask a more profound question of if this answer they give us is justifiable, is if it is, and we also should try to make this type of artificial intelligence that is answering to us accountable for the answer she's giving to us. And if we cannot make it accountable, of course, because it's not a proper agent in a certain sense, then we should try to make accountable the developers, the companies that create this artificial intelligence. And so we should ask justification for why they make it directly to them.
Thank you for your response. Please, Ben, unmute yourself, ask your question or make your comments.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. My question, first, I have a thought. So, the idea of the right to justification and explanation and solving the whole opacity problem seems to suggest that people are generally very interested in what goes on behind the scenes in the development of artificial intelligence or the large language models, processes, and all that. But if we take a look at the world we live in, that doesn't seem to be the case. Majority of the population doesn't seem to be really involved in the decision-making processes in societies. If you ask the average person on the street, sometimes what the law says about so and so issues, they don't have any idea. They just delegate that responsibility to the representatives to be the one in charge. So I think we are even overestimating the masses' interest in knowing every itty-bitty details of what goes on behind the scene in decision making. That aside, so in the context of the development of artificial intelligence, here's what I think. Don't you think it is better generally for society if the process remains opaque than accessible to everyone? Keeping in mind how dangerous artificial intelligence is, its potential. For example, if every Tom, Dick, and Harry has access to the entire decision-making, understand what goes on behind the scene, then it makes it also very easy for hackers, terrorist groups, and the rest to also be able to manipulate those technologies. Maybe the complicated nature of what goes on behind the scenes, decision making models is something that is actually beneficial to the state structure for security reasons. So if that process was so clear and so available to everyone, don't you think non-state actors and not so good individuals might want to manipulate that to their advantage and sometimes use that to cause harm to the state? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very clever question. I will start with the first one. Yeah, I do believe that if we try to go in the street, actual talk with people, most of them will not be so interested in what's happening behind the. Yeah, for example, if we take ChatGPT, which is probably the most popular one now, yeah, I think people maybe do not care that much of what was happening behind it or what are the consequences of the action. But this, I would say, just show that sometimes people are irresponsible. So like they are responsible of their action. So they are maybe they just not informed enough. Like Reidenburg would say they have not reached a proper self-advocacy, self-interested in this sense. But sure, so if we know, for example, that also using this type of artificial intelligence also is having a environmental impact, no, is because it's very energetically costing. Even just asking something very silly on ChatGPT, we should say now probably that people that use it for everything and just don't know that actually using it is damaging the planet is probably are responsible. So we should say two things. If he is not aware of it, she's not self-informed. No, if he's aware of it and he still use it for a silly question or like for something else that he could use simply a Google research, which is very much more cost efficient, then we should say that he's irresponsible, no? And if we ask him why you do that, no, we want a reason why you still keep using ChatGPT, knowing that it's very cost effective. And if it's not able to give us some reason that convince us, we will consider him not irresponsible in a sense, no. So this is a matter of accountability. So being accountable for the action you decide to take. But it was a very interesting question. Thanks. And the second question was more about matter of the risk of the artificial intelligence and about bad person. Also like a person that maybe can use it to do bad things. And I think this is also a very clever question because I have the feeling also that maybe Rainer Forst, especially also maybe Kate, underestimate this. So they maybe have this type of conception of the agent that are reasonable autonomous, that like try to seek the good. So like that, like in a certain sense, it's more like a Socratic conception, no? That people that do bad things only do it because they don't know the good. But maybe this is a little bit naive conception of some people that actually actively try to do bad things, like using, as you say, ChatGPT, like not Chat, like artificial intelligence for like also bioterrorism or something like that. And I think this is a good question that probably we should redirect to them on how they would try to tackle this problem. But I still think that they the project, they manifesto, let's say, is still interesting to try to demand more accountability in general in our society on. And I think this is something we are very much lacking also in the political life news. We see like a lot of politicals now, they can say something and the day after they say like negate what they just said. And obviously this shows that there is a lack of accountability and coherence. Now this is the direction all these two authors want to go on, also on the field of artificial intelligence.
Thank you for your response. Ben, do you want to follow up? We still have more time.
I think that's a good response. So my idea is generally that I think given the nature of the technology we are talking about, that maybe it is in some sense a good thing if everything is not so crystal clear and accessible to everybody, given the potential of that technology to be exploited by several actors for other purposes. And one thing that also makes this very notable is look at where all the artificial intelligence, the developers of ChatGPT, for example, and then the DeepSeek from China comes from. You see, most of this technology seems to be developed and centered basically from one region, the West, and recently China. But almost the entire planet is using these technologies. People are not questioning it. The last chunk of the population is not even asking these questions outside philosophers and academics and intellectual institutions, and then maybe a few policymakers in the government. Majority of the population using this technology don't even care. They just want answers to the question, if I input this, am I going to get the answer? And the answer is yes, and then they go ahead and start using it at the risk of sometimes even their privacy and all that. So I think generally the population doesn't care. That's one. Only maybe the highly educated and really conscious section of the population, policymakers care. And then secondly, just the nature of it's just like if you take nuclear technology, for example, the more secretive, the more, inaccessible it is, the better for the world because of the potential danger of every country having access to nuclear technology and then being able to use that for nuclear weapons and all that. So maybe artificial intelligence falls into the category of that kind of technology that I think it shouldn't be good for society to be to that accessible in terms of what goes on behind the scenes. But that is not to dispute the strengths of your argument that, yeah, some sort of clarity is needed, especially maybe if we're talking about in the area of when we are giving access to our private data, when we are using this technology in that area, then we may need a lot of transparency, how my data is processed, are they being sold to third party and all that without my consent, like we had the Cambridge Analytica case a few years ago and all that. So in terms of data privacy and all that, it might be very useful, transparency, yeah, and all that. But in terms of construction, development of the models in itself, I think what happens if every region or society that wants to avoid this problem, maybe it's better you go ahead and build industries that also help you to develop your own technologies, your own artificial intelligence and robots, and then you use it in the context of your society as you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you for the follow-up also. I don't know if I have time to also answer this, but yeah,
Okay.
I mostly agree with him.
Okay, if you have a comment to give, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, just very quickly, I believe that just to be clear, also I'm not blaming the population for not being super interested on what's happening behind ChatGPT. So of course, in this type of world we are living it, like a worker have not a lot of time also to ask this type of question if they are not fortunate enough as us that doing this for living, like asking question, no? So I'm not blaming a normal worker that have his full day schedule and he just use ChatGPT to simplify his life. So I think this quest that it should not be placed on them. So it's not a quest. It's not the burden should not go to the worker. It's we as a society. So intellectuals, academics, researchers, but also specifically policymaker should make this type of question and should try to already legislate on this type of artificial intelligence in order to let the artificial intelligence arrive to the actual population already filtered, already being in a position that they are not harmful for them, they are not harmful for the planet Earth, and all this thing. But yes, thanks a lot for the question.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Maybe the best way to go around it might be to have a limit to the extent we can explain or make the developing process or the designing process of AI systems transparent. Maybe we should have a limit of it. so that the general public will not, or people that want to use it to do bad, will not really have full access to the whole process. So it becomes a win-win kind of thing. So we are aware of this in order to anticipate some of the moral, social, and legal issues that AI systems are posing or will pose. And at the same time, there's this type of black box in kind of that will also, in a way, limit how much or we should know about these systems. Okay, all the same, thank you for your lecture. Thank you, Ben, for your contributions. We'll be moving